republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'm going to take a quick minute and say a short blessing over our study session tonight so we can do good things with it. Lord God, we come to you tonight to say thank you for giving us the opportunity to serve our town. We ask that you be with us tonight as we hear good discussion, make comments, constructive comments, and that we would push forward with the best ideas for our town. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right. That was A and B. That went quick. Okay. So we have the first item, which is TA 2025-04, discussion regarding potential changes to the noise ordinance. Can we have some discussion from town staff on that?
Absolutely. So first of all, the text that we will be changing is not in the zoning code. So this will be your opportunity to give us some feedback and input on it. Once we're done here, we take it straight to council because it's in the town code, it's not in the zoning code. But you guys have, you are a representation of the community. We also took it to our zoning committee. So we got feedback from the zoning committee, get feedback from you guys, make some alterations based on your comments, and then we'll take that to council. You guys are good vetters for us because you are in touch with people out there. You know what issues are, you know what issues you have. And so it's really important that we get some feedback from you. The next case is our case.
Okay, so this goes straight to the town council?
Yes, it does.
We just offer suggestions at this point.
So it might be good to talk about currently, because it's in the town code and it's not under the police department, it's a, what's a mixed bag, isn't it?
It is a mixed bag.
Okay.
So we have some level of enforcement through code, specifically on like conditional use permits or events, specifically that. But the good majority of it comes down to the Chino Valley PD for their enforcement. It's not good, I'm sure.
Well, can you explain some of the situations that you and Jessica had when we were doing the Olson CUP, what the code said and what you guys struggled with? And then maybe we ask Commissioner Pizzi to add some experiences that he's had.
Right. So on our end, one of the biggest ones that we ran into with the conditional use permit specific for Olson's was the noise ordinance really didn't, I mean, so you have your hours of where it's in effect of low noise, which is from midnight to 5 a.m. So from 5:01 a.m. to 11:59 at night, it's pretty much fair game within reason. However, that caveat of within reason gets to, you know, here's a list of things that are kind of sort of not okay. It includes things like boom boxes if they're loud, if you can hear it from a distance of greater than 50 feet, that's considered a violation. If you hear, you know, that could be just us talking, if you hear that, that is technically a violation of the noise ordinance. It still had things referencing phonographs. Phonographs haven't been around in a very long time.
How many of you here have one? Okay.
All right, okay, it's not shaming night.
It's not plugged in.
It's not plugged in, yeah. But, I mean, regulations specific to that, you know, it just hasn't been touched. I think the last time the ordinance was even briefly touched was in 2000. So we're looking at 26 years since it's even really been looked at heavily. Wow. And I think in 2000 was regarding like barking dogs from what my research turned up. So it wasn't even like a full.
Well, and I thought they split that out into a whole separate
ordinance. And I think that's
ordinance.
when they did it.
Okay.
So things like that, and then it was, well, if you want to be loud, you can get, you know, the approval from the chief of police, if you know, and then you got carte blanche. So it's a lot of holes, a lot of oddities, so we need to take a look through it. Our PD has really requested this too, because they're the ones getting the complaint. You know, your neighbor's playing their guitar too loud. I think you might have had an issue with that, and it's like the dude's inside playing Hendrix, like, oh, who's that bug, you know? So a lot of issues on that, and I don't know, Commissioner Pizzi, if you want to share how your experience.
it was antiquated, it was old.
Yeah.
I mean, it was old and there was no common sense to it, no reasonableness to it. And that's the big part to me is when anything amplified sound outside of 50 feet, which width of this room is 50 feet, could be considered a violation. And more often than not, when you see it, is not someone that's really upset, it's neighbor disputes. One neighbor is unhappy with the other neighbor, and hey, I'm 51 feet away and I can hear him playing his radio, and I'm gonna call in and I'm gonna complain. And because the ordinance says it's the middle of the day, it's noon, and it's outside of 50 feet, I can do that. I mean, there was just no common sense to it. It was ridiculous, and, you know, and that's, you know, I think I've made more people mad by not enforcing it than actually enforcing it. Cause I would go out there and it's like you said, there was a gentleman in his house who lived on 3 North, 3 South, playing his guitar and had the front door open, wasn't even jamming out or anything, just playing guitar, and a neighbor called and complained, and I stood out 50 feet away and I could hear it, but it was not offensive or anything, and common sense says leave, so.
For context, Commissioner Pizzi is former Chino Valley PD, so he's firsthand on this stuff. Is there anything else?
Nope, that's
Okay.
good. So, we worked with the zoning committee, we shared with them ordinances from, of course, ours. Paradise Valley, which was only understandable by attorneys. It's horrid. Apache Junction, Queen Creek, Goodyear, Casa Grande, Marana, and Prescott. And we were trying to pick pieces out of each one, and it's really hard when it has to be like a cohesive ordinance to pick pieces, because each ordinance is written to encapsulate all of the pieces that it needs, and so when you pick one part, it's tied to something else in the old ordinance, so if you don't really take the full ordinance, you are gonna miss some things, and it's not gonna mesh well. So I was frustrated and went hunting and ended up with Wickenburg. And so that's the ordinance that you have, because when the committee looked at it, they'd gotten all these other ones, and they were struggling a little bit, just like staff was, and when I gave them Wickenburg, they went, oh yeah, this works really well. So on your copy, the yellow is just because I have to talk to the police chief and see if that's the equipment and the definition that they're currently using. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong, I just need to check with him before we move forward. But the committee, the zoning committee, had looked at the table that you guys have and focused a lot on that. And Vice Chair Paziak was there and sat through that and gave us some comments. We have a couple of people in the audience that are on our committee that attended. And so they looked at hours, days of the week, and hours when you could be X loud. And so we went through a process of looking at, well, what is 70 decibels and what is 65 decibels? And what is a whisper and how loud's a vacuum cleaner? And when a car revs on on a road, how loud really is that when you're 200 feet away with nothing in between you? And so in relationship to airports, the farthest noise contour that they look at is a 65 decibel noise contour where you're not allowed to build houses. So that tells me that someone has done some science and figured out that if you're under a flight path and in that noise contour and you hear 65 decibel noise all day or all night, that's not good for human beings. If the FAA and other organizations dealing with aircraft don't let you build a house in that noise contour. The most, I mean, if you go to like Marine Corps stations where they have the what's the new one?
35.
No,
Is it
plane type.
F-35.
35 Joint Strike Fighter, those are like so loud, like they'll pop your eardrums. But if you have a potbelly pig, its squeal is 110 decibels. A regular conversation is about
I think it was like 45, 50.
50, 65. So we went through that to understand what does that really mean in the neighborhood. The group felt that the residential should be more protected than commercial and industrial. They also felt like the hours of nighttime needed to be bigger for residential. I mean, that's where people sleep. Hopefully you're not sleeping at work, even if you happen to be working at night. And so we made some shifting on this table. I know that when we were doing Olson's, and you guys stood at Olson's, and that's a distance away from 89, the noise of the traffic was
Louder
70,
there.
65?
It's over 60.
I think it was like 68 or 70, depending upon.
Okay.
And that was at their fence line. So they're using.
That's what I remember,
Yeah.
65 from the meeting.
Yeah.
That could be different.
So we also wanted to make sure there's provisions in here that talk about, construction. Thought we had construction in here someplace.
Mhm.
Because generally, construction
Before,
needs to start earlier.
In the summer.
Yes.
We find it
it's on before.
before. Thank you. We talked about the barking dogs, B3, and there's a special provision for that in another ordinance, so I'm gonna talk to the police chief about that one as well. So if there's any of these in B that you look at and you say, well, that doesn't make sense here. I know that noises carry a lot further out in the country. I know it's very disturbing to be on your porch and hear something that's like bazillion miles away, if it's obnoxious noise to you.
This was one that we're like, really, do we really have to put in outdoor holiday music? But when you get that one neighbor who runs their outdoor light display 24/7.
Yeah, really, we had a couple of people that said that it's intolerable.
Yeah. Jingle bells are great, but jingle bells 24/7
Yeah,
will make you lose your mind.
you know, ho ho ho,
I'm
but not
working
at
my
night.
way there.
Yeah, so that was a piece that we did add in because people understand what works and what doesn't work here. If we're in a more urban area where there's a higher ambient noise level, then there's a lot of stuff we don't hear as much. If you live near a railroad track, a lot of people after a while don't even hear the trains. I mean, that's how our bodies work, but we're in a pretty quiet place. So I didn't know.
And I've been out at night and I can hear the train all the way up in Holden. If there's clouds, low clouds or anything, it
Yeah.
just reverberates all the way through.
But if you live next to it, you probably didn't hear it at all. Just because over time you don't hear it. If you live next to the freeway, over time, it's just white noise.
Yeah. My only thing I saw was under 4M, noises made by livestock. On property zoned to allow for the keeping of livestock. Braying donkeys and peacocks and
Oh, peacocks
guinea
are horrid.
hens don't sleep. They will make noise all night long, so that's the only thing I can see somebody, if they have peacocks in a neighboring yard, somebody might call and say, I can't sleep, the peacocks are in season and they're screaming all night long, so then
Can we
they have,
define livestock though? Cause to me, a donkey or a peacock's not considered livestock.
No.
And I think it would be inherent definition wise to put something to define it so it's that common sense simplicity, this is what livestock is considered.
Okay,
Livestock's considered swine, cattle, horse,
chickens.
chickens.
then you got roosters crowing at 3 AM.
So, and I've heard that 50-50, it's, well, that's Chino, and well, I hate that, so
I think we need to be careful with the livestock part of it.
Yeah,
I live next to the winery, well, behind it. I had the peacocks visit our property a while back. actually kind of fun to watch. We live in the country, this is part of what the deal is, we
Yeah.
live here.
And these are exemptions,
Mhm.
guys.
Yeah. As I said, that's the only thing I can see that somebody would wanna complain about, you know,
Well, we did have dialogue about it in the zoning committee, because some people go, oh, there's this, you know, my neighbor's got this rooster and it's so obnoxious, and then other people go, they're cool, cause they walk around, it's
I
like,
have roosters on 3
They
sides
eat
of my home,
ticks
it's just
and
part of the deal.
scorpions.
but scorpions don't make noise, they just bite you.
No, but the roosters will eat them.
Oh,
But you make a good point about what's livestock and what's not livestock, so what would you call a peacock or a goat or
it's an
whatever?
exotic.
I'm not a expert in that, but I'm just telling you, so from an enforcement end of it, and because if I can almost guarantee if Chino PD goes out and it's like, how do we enforce this? What is defined? They're gonna err on the side of caution and not do anything. And then that upset person's gonna be coming in and seeing them and saying, you know, this is a violation. You know, I hate to say, like, even under, like, the one I was gonna ask was 3A, the bottom of 3A, where it talks about any reasonable person of normal sensitiveness residing in the area. You know, so I'm a normal person, Mr. Welkler's a normal person, but we may interpret that noise totally different. So on a enforcement end, you know, so that, I guess my question would be, what is the first, would the decibels be the first thing for the officers to go out there? And if it's within decibel range, consider if the noise is offensive to a normal person with sensitivity? Those are the things where, you know, we throw out something with a bunch of decibels and then we say, you know, well, if a normal person is offended by it, then the decibels don't matter.
But
And,
the decibels do, I mean, we're setting the standard with the decibels.
and that's what I'm getting
Yeah.
at, the clarification of what's the priority, is it the decibels? And if the officer goes out there with a decibel reader and he reads it and it's within the decibel amount, sorry, have a nice day, folks,
Correct.
it's within the law. But then we have a caveat in there that says, you know, disturbs the peace or quiet of any neighborhood or which causes discomfort or annoyance to any reasonable person of normal sensitiveness residing in the area. So,
That's actually a wide open statement.
exactly,
No
That's why you guys are
no
looking at it.
Karens allowed.
exactly. And those are the, you know, cause then you get in there, so years ago, Santan Flats in Santan Valley it's a bar and it's a steakhouse and they have an outdoor seating area and they had live bands. And that was a huge thing we dealt with when law enforcement down there. Was one particular neighbor who called every weekend, said the music is too loud, it's annoying. We would, every time we went, we would have to go out, stand at the edge of their property with a decibel reader. And if it was below, we left. If it was above, we went down and told them they had to turn it down, gave them a warning. But that's where it came down to, is we went by what the decibels were versus, and then the people bought their own decibel reader and they would wait till it was above and then call and show us they had their own decibel reader. But
Time to move.
I think there needs to be some sort of, hey, if it's within the decibels, it's
Okay.
within the decibels, that's the requirements, and, you know, sorry.
Okay.
But like Mr. Merritt said, it's kind of very wide and broad and open to people to interpret to their benefit.
Okay. Good
I
comments,
mean,
what else?
the whole item A, notwithstanding any other provision of this section, and in addition thereto, it shall be unlawful for any person without justification, which what does that mean? To make or continue or cause or permit to be made or continue any unnecessary, excessive, or offensive noise, which, what does that mean? Which disturbs the peace and quiet. What does that mean? So this whole provision should probably just be pulled out. Alright.
Done.
And your comments
Oh,
speak from experience, so that was
Yeah,
nice.
and if you
I
wanna
don't
leave
ha-
it in,
I don't have a problem taking that out, but what do you do with the cute Christmas music that goes on 24 hours a day? How do you address that?
Well, I think
It's
item A
never-
only comes out,
That's
not B,
Where-
just item A, because
Oh,
it's so ambiguous.
unless you wanna get into, like I
No.
said, definitions where
Right.
you define what unnecessary, excessive, or offensive noise is considered.
And
And that's a
That's
road
hard
that
to
would
do.
take
Yeah, it's
a
super
month to
hard.
go down.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking that 3A is like that catch-all for your neighbor who doesn't, change their alarm, or either they left and their alarm is going off or whatever.
Well, that should be something, we should have an alarm permit ordinance with the town anyways for that.
Well, I'm not gonna write your alarm permit ordinance. Sorry.
That's how you handle those.
Yeah,
You collect
yeah.
fines when they go off and don't need to, but it's I think that's just that's
Okay.
opening the door for that one Karen that is
Okay.
gonna be,
Karen has been removed.
okay, thank you.
Once
And
we've done with that,
eyes.
we should go to B next.
Okay,
And that probably needs the same thing that A got. Cause it's conducted and which disturbs the peace and quiet of a neighborhood or person. So now we're talking about the guy that doesn't like the next door neighbor.
Yeah.
That's just another,
And I think if you just put in there, I think with B, those things are understandable, but there needs to be something, I think, in this that says, the first course of action is it above the decibel level? And if it's not above the accepted decibel level, then,
Fair.
We
so
can
if I
keep-
turn my 24-hour
Number
Christmas
two
music
addresses
down,
howling.
That-
I don't know, it's still, no,
What?
Jeff.
So we would keep the provisions, but maybe tweak the wordage of the
Yeah.
first of it to be a little bit more definitive.
okay.
And number 2 there does address squawks and,
yeah,
Yeah. Would you call a peacock a domesticated bird?
No, I'd call it an exotic bird.
Exotic.
it's
yeah.
considered domestic.
I would say that a zoo would not agree with you.
Heritage Park
For
ones.
the,
to-
the
you
county
need to,
fairs, it's considered a domesticated bird for judging.
Are they 4-H animals?
Yeah,
But we're not judging them.
but they're just considered domestic. Chickens, ducks,
Okay,
geese.
so 4-H says that they're domestic, zoos say they're exotic.
Even pheasants, which I don't consider a pheasant.
Okay, so help us with the noise ordinance.
How do we get?
We don't have to solve everything, just bring out points
Yeah.
that look like they need more work, or we
So-
forgot X.
So as long as our advice is this
Yes.
opening statement of B
Yes,
just needs to be tightened up to where it's not so ambiguous.
that's what we need, and then we'll
I
go
would
work
say
on
any
it.
person engaging in the following activities to produce noise beyond the acceptable decibel noise levels or allowable noise levels
'Cause if we can
beyond the
key-
property line on which the activities are conducted.
If we can key off of the decibel level,
Yeah.
that gives the officer that's trying to enforce, it's right there, he can say, look, you're either in it or you're out of it.
Yeah,
Well, I think that's covered in item 2 here.
Yeah, we just refer them back to that chart.
Yeah.
That
So
item
maybe
2
we're
of the
making,
code.
we make the subsections of 3B, so 1 through 5, we just make that a subsection of
2.
2.
Two,
Yeah.
correct.
so some of this is gonna happen not on somebody's property where there is a property line. So there could be other types of noise. Just saying.
What do you mean?
I mean, you could have somebody walking with a squat box, with a boom box. You could have,
Motorcycles driving by with their radio on loud.
you can't pass laws for all that.
No,
I mean, that,
And
some
I
guy
think-
walking by with his radio on, or a motorcycle riding by, or
I
somebody
guess
starting their hot rod in the garage, you can't just,
no.
It's done and over, it's a short.
so what we need from you guys is, what things do you find obnoxious about noise levels in Chino or any place else that you've been, that you think it should be subject to some kind of controls? We've already got the barking dog piece someplace else, so we're not dealing with barking dogs. We're gonna define what barnyard animals are, or whatever we
Livestock.
call them, livestock.
So that's actually not a bad definition for both livestock and barnyard animals, cause that could cover chickens and sheep and goats and that sort of business.
Correct. So you pointed out to us that the first thing the officer does is check the decibel level. Cool.
That
That's
should be the standard, I think.
correct. So what other things in here, or with just your experience? I lived in a place where my next door neighbor, we were in like townhouses, he drove a semi-truck, which is fine until he turned it on at 5 in the morning and it vibrated for 2 hours. It was,
Is that why that 2-hour thing's in there? I got that one.
No, I think that's a good ordinance too,
No.
because there are communities where, and fortunately for us, we're not really one of them unless you're over by the Days, or is it the Days Inn we have? The
Days
hotel, where the semis, but you can get a lot of those, and if they're in a residential area, idling all night long. I know most cities, that is
it's rough.
something they enforce and ban overnight kind of parking or idling of the truck, so I think that's just fine.
Cause when I lived in Litchfield Park, I was just down the road from Blue Sky Farms, and they had the refrigerator trucks that would come and park and
Yep.
wait until they opened in the morning, and they had to run the generators to keep the refrigerator going, and the noise didn't bother us so much as the fumes kind of thing.
It's
Yeah,
like
but it-
the low level of
The-
noise
Yeah,
that's
you feel it
challenging. Yeah.
more than you hear it, the vibration, yeah.
There's times when there's somebody at Memory Park, and we live in Appaloosa Meadows, so we're fairly close, and you can hear the band playing at night. My theory of that is, if I wanted to hear it, I would, let me go down and pay attention to it, or just close my door. I don't think, because that might be, it may be where we're at, it may show up as being loud, but it's not. I mean, it's one of those things, that's why we have a park.
Well, I think that's covered in another part of the
Yeah.
ordinance.
But it's not, it's something people can still,
I think you're gonna wind up having people complaining anyways.
Oh, yeah.
That's just the human nature, but the trick
And it's to 10
is
o'clock.
to let the officer go there with a sound meter and say, yep, they're either in it, they're out. If they're out, I'll go talk to them and see what we can work out. But there has to be some flexibility, a little bit of flexibility, but the DB thing has to be anchored. And like you say, I hear the wineries bands play on Saturday all the time. Unfortunately, the music's usually pretty good. But it's not something that's gonna ruin my whole day, cause it happens every Saturday
Right.
during the season. And I wouldn't wanna interfere with what they're doing. They have a right to use their property, and they're actually a fair ways away. So-
yeah, but the sound carrier, that's what I'm saying, but there needs to not be, where somebody could be cited, I don't wanna hear that sound, officer, go write them up, or
Yeah.
whatever.
Right.
We can't make it so
We need to
tough
keep
that,
it-
that you could do that.
Yeah.
There needs to be, the officer gets out of his car and he goes, I can barely hear it, that's just gotta really piss off somebody to hear, for him not to take the guy's side right away. And then, well, let me get this decimeter, oh, it's only 59. There's gotta be, using sound levels is a good thing, but there's gotta be a way that people have to understand a lot of these exemptions. They have to understand that before they make the call, or when they make the call, that they get explained what the exemptions are.
They won't.
Well, no, but that's
I agree with you.
it
but
doesn't
they
get any
won't.
better.
No.
So I think to your point, the decibel level is measured at the property line of the sound.
Correct.
So if they're at 70 or, they're below whatever there is, and, the officer's good, but you still hear it, so because the way we're restructuring this to where, you're doing the litmus test, 2 is 2 checked, are they in violation of it? No, then there's no violation. So even if you hear it, from Memory Park to your house, as long as they're under whatever we would consider that decibel level at property line, there would be no violation.
But isn't there an exception for
There is.
Yeah.
Community,
parades, concerts, festivals, fairs that have like a town permit?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then they would have limits on their hours of operation.
Well, I know when I lived in Campbell, I could hear the parks, and they had the DJs and stuff at Memory Park. And it was like, you could kind of set your watch, okay, 9 9:59,
Off.
off it we go, I think. So they were good about that.
So are you guys good with the times? I mean, and our bigger concern is residential, obviously.
The only thing I wonder about is on B4 where it says sunrise. Should it be, set time like maybe 5:30, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock?
We could be Paradise Valley and we could adjust it based on 4 minutes of daylight a day until June 21st, and then we subtract it, but, I mean, it's basically when the construction guys go out, they're not gonna go out in the dark.
I realize that.
Construction guys normally wanna start as early as possible.
Yep.
And 7 a.m. is like the agreed standard time to start in the neighborhood. And they're done by 5 o'clock unless there's some special thing going on. I don't know that that's a little bit going.
My grader has lights, so I'll go out and do it all night long, so. I do when it's
But
Snowplows.
in your deal, they're happy to have you do it. Please grade my road.
Most of the construction, I've been around, has been at 6 a.m.
Mhm.
That's what they feel that's the time, 6 a.m.
Yeah.
Whether it is sunlight or not, it's a set time, and they're gonna do it.
Well, and I know big areas with big concrete pours,
Yep.
it doesn't get as hot here as it down in the valley, but they'll start pouring at 3 a.m., 4 a.m. in the pitch black so they can get the concrete down before it gets hot. I mean, I
And
don't see,
That's because if it gets too hot, the
Yeah.
concrete doesn't
yes,
set right.
exactly.
And you're right, we don't have that temperature up here.
We do have a construction guy here, though.
6 o'clock pours, we do them, but we don't do them frequently. Most of the time at 7. In the summertime, the earlier you can pour, the better. I don't think I've ever, in all the years I've been in the construction business, which is a lot, I've only had complaints a couple of times of starting too early, and most of the time it was somebody that worked in a factory that their sleep time,
That was different,
we,
yeah.
they were happy with us starting at 7, but 6 o'clock was not okay, cause it's messing with their sleep time, so those kind of things can be handled actually, I think, with what you have here.
Okay.
But
And that's usually
there
a
are some
1 day.
industrial jobs where they might pour all night long, and if that gets to be a problem, they get to go to the town manager and get a permit to pour concrete all night long.
Well, hopefully you're not living in an industrial area.
Right.
And the noise limits in
Do-
industrial are higher.
Pretty high.
Yeah, Dewey can
But more
complain
for
about
lights
that
and
when they
that
build
sort
the
of
industrial thing out there by the racetrack.
So, are we
I'm good.
pretty solid? Is there other comments to be made? I mean, I think you guys did a great job here.
We'll thank Wicked
Well, I
Word
think
for
Mike
that.
has something here.
The exemption, that would also cover something like 7A, motorcycle noise repeatedly in an event. If they were to get a temporary exemption, that would cover it?
No, cause it says it's prohibited. Other prohibited noise, it doesn't really offer anything for an exemption for that. I mean,
So somebody could complain about Olson's running a motorcycle,
They have a CUP, and
they
so they have a
pay a
time
fee for
limit.
the event, it's an event.
okay, that's what I wanna
Yeah.
make sure of, is that.
I
it
think
could be
this is
used against
intended
them.
for somebody,
And then item B also covers it because it tells you have to have a muffler.
right. I think this is intended to cover people that just are intent on not doing the right thing.
Yeah, when I was reading, I just
Question.
wanted to make sure.
Yeah, good question.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's the kind of stuff that you guys bring to this that helps make this into something that's gonna work well. So thank you.
It seems that 7A and B, because it just says other prohibited noise. Now, where I live, half the people own cars that may or may not have mufflers. And they don't run them up and down the street, but they may run them in the garage to get them ready to go race them or. So that would be a violation right there, no matter who starts their car. It's pretty vague, I think.
I have a lot of guys with rods and they're my neighbors. I'm not about to call on them because I try to enjoy it.
Yeah, but the guy that doesn't have a hot rod might.
Maybe if it became,
If they run out and
it says
start it in the
loud
winter
and
and let it
unnecessary
run for.
grating, grinding, and rattling.
Sounds like my truck. Sorry.
Oh,
if he trucks that loud.
But I think again, for something like that, you go back to the decibel.
As long as it's
Is it,
rooted there.
is it outside at the property line? You know, and I think that's the big part, adding the property line is really gonna help with.
So what do we do when it is 90 decibels and it's only running for a minute or so? But you know, it's what do the guy starts his car in the garage, and he's tuning it, or whatever. It could be a motorcycle, could be a car, something that's almost got to be motorized. And the guy across the street says, I don't like your noise, so he calls the police, and it is too loud. So what is the guy supposed to do? Like move?
Well, he might, if it does a lap, we might try to put something in there about a continual loud noise, like
Yeah,
on
I
the
thought we
muffler
had
part.
There you
something
go.
like intermittent noise.
Because when, so I understand what you're saying, they fired up, everybody, all car guys like to hear the noise, that's their deal. And so why interfere with that unless the guy's out there for 2 hours? And besides that, by the time the cop gets there and he gets his meter out, there's no noise at all.
Right.
So you almost gotta catch the guy in the 2-minute active revving up the hot rod just to hear the
Plus,
noise.
Don't we
like
have something that's got
5G
intermittent?
starts, whether the sound will be steady, intermittent, impulsive,
There
or
it is, yeah.
repetitive. I think that's already been addressed.
Yeah.
Whatever you do, it's gonna be better than what we have.
Yep.
Mhm.
On
True.
top of that, this is actually quite
Mhm.
well done.
Yeah.
So do we all agree this is
Yeah.
acceptable to pass forward?
Yeah.
We'll make some changes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we get down to item C2, PA 2025-03, discussion on possible AR-36 ordinance, which would mean agricultural, residential, 36-acre property
Good
size.
intro on it. All right, so for those that have been on P and Z a little longer, you might remember that we did have AR-36 in our code. We got rid of it, or brought forth the text amendment the same night we did the guest house, oh my gosh, square footage increase. So the nexus behind removing it at that time was we don't have any property in Chino Valley that's zoned AR-36. Why do we have it? Let's just get rid of it. Let's fast forward now to the 2040 general plan, and there was a lot of feedback for bringing that back. You know, these are primarily users, you know, it's not gonna be your average citizen who has 36 acres here in Chino. It's gonna be a lot of the ranch land that currently is zoned for a 2-acre minimum or even a 1-acre minimum in some areas that they got annexed in back in 2000, 2006, when the idea was Chino Valley is gonna be the new mecca of Arizona. And we all realize now that that is illogical and not possible. But they still have the zoning to do so. So instead of trying to make the square peg fit in the round hole, some of these large landowners are saying, okay, let's bring back the AR-36 because it did offer something that I currently can't do with my property. So
Which is non-residential.
which is non-residential stuff, so that it can be, well, we'll get into it here, but essentially what's before you tonight is what we took out of the code back in, I'm sorry, I don't have a date, but it was was before you. So it actually might have been before 2020, I think it might have been 2018, 2019. So there are some things that we're gonna need to go in and update. Number 2 here, since this was done the same night that we increased the guest house size, we're gonna need to modify this and bring that to current code. Within the AR4 and AR5 districts, a guest house can be 1,200 square feet or 75% of the gross square footage of the principal. This one just says it can't exceed 50%, so we wanna make sure that we're consistent with the AR4 and AR5 districts. You still have the keeping of farm agricultural. Big thing on this is that it does not prohibit commercial like you see on the single-family residential lots. That says primarily not commercial. Once you get to ag, you should be able to do it for a commercial purpose within reason. Still have the customary accessory structures. This is a pretty boilerplate across the all zoning districts, we are gonna have to add Connex boxes to this, since that did come post.
We didn't do a separate ordinance for the comments?
We allowed it as a customary accessory structure, though we had it in their metal storage containers. Home occupations, that's across all residential, agricultural or not. Stands for sale of farm produce, equestrian recreation facilities, libraries, museums. This was actually one of the families here that said, you know, hey, we have a pretty big history here in Chino, and if we have the ability to create some sort of small museum to, you know, our family heritage, we would love to be able to offer that to the community. This makes sure that they can do that. Bed and breakfasts, dude ranches.
I know you don't like that. Will and I thought about this.
So I grew up in Wyoming, and I subconsciously, I guess, blocked this from my mind that I did this almost every year. But so, you know, going in there, there's, you know, trying to get in with like agritourism and stuff like that. If there's an opportunity here, I just hate the name. It's just me though. Getting into conditional uses.
Not a chick ranch, it's a dude ranch.
Maybe the other way, Lori. Conditional uses, this is where, we get into, a lot of the same are within the AR4, AR5 districts now. Privately owned, operated recreation facilities, colleges, universities, trade schools.
Like things that take up a
Large.
lot more land
Right.
than you would find in any of the other zoning districts. And because they have a lot more land to put a bigger facility on, they have more room to buffer it from what's close by.
Correct. So you're getting into that, I mean, these are listed within AR4, AR5 already. But I mean, they are more appropriate in 36-acre slots compared to, you know, a 5-acre slot. Rodeos, fairgrounds, riding academies, that's also an AR5, that's what the Olson CUP came in under. Airports, aircraft landing fields. Right now, the only provision we have in code for airports is an industrial. Industrial doesn't have a minimum lot size.
But we don't have much that's zoned industrial, and we don't have much that's general planned industrial.
Correct. So if there was ever a place, you know, having something on AR36, or if the, you know, I wanna have a private landing strip, you know, this is the area to do so. Cemeteries, livestock auctions, feed yards, we were discussing that at length today. So feed yard, it depends on where you are in the nation, where feed lot yards are synonymous with feed lots. Where I was growing up in Wyoming, a feed yard was not the same as a feed lot. A feed yard is a less intense use. It's somewhere mid between a feed lot and what you're, you know, if you're out grazing for cattle. So we're probably gonna have to tweak this a little bit. It might have to wait until we get more discussion in on the livestock ordinance, because trying to encapsulate what a less intense feed yard is, it's not a feed lot, but you know, you might have 20 cows on 8 acres or 30 cows on 8 acres, but because under our current code, it would technically be considered a feed lot if you have to subsidize their feed, and it's in purpose for fattening and
Right.
sell market. I mean, at least my personal opinion, that Chino Valley should promote more feed yard in that sense, to where you are having these smaller establishments that are doing a little bit more quote unquote custom beef offerings or whatnot. I think that's a pretty Chino use. I've heard from several in the area that they want to be able to do that. However, with our code, we're forced to classify it as a feed lot, because there's that, and it's not the same. We all know that a feed lot, when you think of it, that's, you know, you're in pens, they don't move. It's you're fattening them up as quick as possible for sale. Where a lot of these more feed yard activities are.
Yeah, and the
more
feed lots, they have mountains. If you've driven on the 8 to San Diego, before Yuma, there's a place, then they've got thousands and thousands and thousands of head of cattle.
Dairy farm.
Dairy farm, yeah.
Dairy
Dairy
farm.
And they don't they don't till the stuff under, it's like mountains of manure.
And they climb to the top.
And there's a green mist when you go between the two, seriously, cause I
There
drove
was
that,
the one outside Yarnell.
Forever,
the
and it's
was
like,
it Shamrock or whatever, yeah.
it's like shut your vents because you're gonna gag.
You should drive on a road after a rain.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Those
slick.
Dairy farms.
Oh,
Or when,
All
in
of that
winter,
before
when
they
they
put the
change
fence
the
in.
silage,
So anyways, that, we don't want that,
no,
We want the feed yard would be
but we
acceptable.
want
Yeah.
somebody
So
that,
you're gonna have to work on the.
yeah,
Right.
so whenever we take this
the
forward, this will likely
distinguishing,
be,
yeah.
Part of the
not-
livestock. ordinance.
correct, so it'll be added
Right.
post.
right,
And then probably included in some level within AR4 and AR5. But that's just what we used to have in code here. This lovely statement here, which we've talked, we've,
yeah.
it's kind of a different subject. You know, but the whole nexus of utility scale solar circled around this definition of public utility being public and private. But yeah, so,
Is it public or private right away?
right, but that was within definitions, so.
Yeah.
And this is within all uses, we tackled it within definition, but we have a statutory limit on when we make a change, it can't be viewed as a I can talk on this
Yeah,
forever.
Or that Prop 207 stuff that we get hit with that has a 3-year statute of
Statute.
limitations. So when we change the code, if we take something out of the code that someone had used before, so like, we've had a lot of dialogue with people that say, we have enough pot farms. I agree. We remove it, then we have 3 years where we could be sued.
Yep.
And that's stuff that we worry about. You guys don't need to worry about that. Staff worries about that, the attorney worries about that. But that's why we don't just go wholesale changing things,
Yeah, because there's a liability.
even though it makes sense for us to do that. We have
And
to be cautious about how we do it.
And speaking of such, there's no provision in here for greenhouses,
Correct, and Mr. Paziak did email us about that commercial greenhouse provision. We do have an allowance within the AR4 and AR5. If you have 10 contiguous yards or more, you can do a commercial greenhouse.
Yards?
Acres, excuse
Oh,
me.
okay, I'm like, what's that?
But a greenhouse is not the same as a cultivation facility, commercial greenhouse. So that's your nursery, that's your bonnie plant,
Your
your,
bonnie plants.
you know, the handful we have,
Flowers, not
flower, the other
Weeds.
flower.
Yeah.
Weeds have bugs.
So,
and that-
does a cultivation plant include something that would grow like greenhouse tomatoes, that kind of thing?
A commercial greenhouse,
Mhm.
correct, yes. Yeah, but, so since we have regulations on, marijuana, both medical and recreational, that's in its own private category, we
And
have.
it's limited to industrial.
Correct,
only.
yes.
Yeah, cause
Yeah.
they're behind Appaloosa Meadows, you've got the flower place, the nursery there, and
She actually has permission to do a, MMJ farm back there.
Is he doing it?
No, it expired, but she did have that for a while.
Bingo.
I think she was doing it at
yeah,
one time, cause I
yeah.
used to smell it all the time
Yeah.
on patrol, so.
Is that a skunk or is that the pop?
No, I knew it wasn't no skunk, so.
and then, like the, tree farm that's up on 4, that came before P and Z to be able to expand to the second 5 acres next to hers,
The same one we're talking about.
okay, cause
Yeah,
I was talking about the one by Appaloosa Meadows that just has the flowers out in the yard, that just, they put
Oh.
sunscreen over it from time to
I-
time,
okay.
but there's no greenhouse, but she could come back in there and put a greenhouse if she wanted to do temperature control for the winter.
Right, but it would not be marijuana.
Yeah, no, that has to be industrial zoning
Yeah, correct.
type thing, but as far as just a greenhouse for like bonnie plant and flowers and
Right.
grapes or something.
Absolutely. So then getting into 10 and 11, indoor outdoor kennels is something that carries from AR4, AR5. It's been a conditional use. We're leaving it in there. I've been on the fence with these though. So if you've got 36 acres of agricultural residential, what should it require a conditional use to run a commercial ranch or commercial stables?
That's something that, I mean, that's
That's
big
what you
enough to
want.
do, that's big
Yeah.
enough to do the
Right.
job, and they should have that by right.
I would agree, that
It
was.
should-
Well,
be a
and that
conditional
kinda
use.
falls under Dude Ranch, cause
Yeah,
you're
'cause
going
I
there
mean-
But Dude
commercially
Ranch
to
is
ride a,
open to the
Public,
Yes.
right,
yeah.
so
I like the conditional use permit for the Dude Ranch.
so conditional,
not.
Dude
You
Ranch
don't
is
have
outright.
I mean, outright by right.
Yeah.
but- And these commercial ranches and stables, they also should be by right, cause that's who's wanting to get
Wanting to
this
do
done,
this.
they're already doing that.
Yeah, cause they've
So
got the
that shouldn't
horses
be
and people
part of
come
the
from
condition.
outside to ride.
So we'll do 11 and
11 and
12,
12.
add to
Move
permitted
to the.
And we already have
Just
3 or
start at
4 of
11
those
right
in
after
town
Yeah.
anyway.
Okay,
So,
Uh,
number 9, we got to the right of way is, and then the next words are exempt from this requirement. If they're exempt, why doesn't it go up
The last
to permitted
sentence.
uses?
it's just the last sentence, the extension of public lines in public or private right-of-way is exempt from the requirement.
See, dummies like me read it as the whole thing,
Oh, no,
so.
just
It
a little
says.
more time on the planning commission and you got it,
You'll be a dummy like us.
yeah.
So then moving into D here,
Before you
oh,
do
sorry.
D,
Before we go to D,
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
what about, worker quarters, worker housing for conditional use, because you have it for AR four and
4
AR
and
5?
5.
Or should we put it up as a permitted use now that we're allowing ranches and stables?
well, if you list it as a permitted use and that is a primary use,
Yeah.
Okay.
and usually you have worker housing with
Yeah.
something else.
Okay.
I'd like to see that part of the conditional use permit.
Okay, worker housing.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, I think it is in
residential
5.
facilities for the developmental disabled,
Not really,
like us?
Like us.
we're just AGE, that's all.
So, I
Usually, the people that need homes
Uh-huh.
they need to be closer to facilities.
Okay. So AR four and AR 5 has it as a conditional
Because it's
use?
in town somewhere probably.
Okay.
And doesn't, aren't those federally regulated anyway?
that's where I was going next, is that, so I don't,
You
it
can't,
depends on which day of the week it is, cause there's so many different case laws. At this point in time, I don't think we
You
can
know what?
require a conditional use permit for those.
I don't want them listed. If somebody wants them, they have to come in and,
Talk about.
Talk about it,
Yeah.
okay, make a case. So, yeah, we'll admit that.
And you've left a good clause in there because there's no way to get a complete list of some talk.
Yeah. The one thing we do need to change to, community development, we no longer have community development. It is development services, so different nuances from different times of code. By the community development director, which
I wasn't doing.
you were new, but
Yeah.
here you are not.
Here I am, something else.
So then going into D, we have just our standard property, property development standards. Minimum lot area, you gotta have 36 acres in your AR 36. Average width, 3,000 feet, front lot frontage, 200 feet, side yard setbacks, front yard is 100, side is 50, street side 50, rear 100, maximum building height 50, and then a lot coverage 10%, which, is, you can cover your property in 3.6 acres of structures.
question, if you're only having a 200-foot frontage,
That's a minimum.
Minimum. So that essentially gives them the leniency that if there needs to be a road, I only need to front 200 feet of that road, I don't need to front 3,000.
isn't there something further in the engineering and stuff about how there's a ratio of frontage to depth of property though? If you're having something that's only 200 foot wide, it's gonna be really deep.
So, frontage and the width won't exactly be the same. So the frontage is specifically a portion of the property that fronts on an access point,
Touches the road.
touches the road. So if you have a cul-de-sac, only 200 feet of that would need to be on the, cul-de-sac would be a bad example. If you had a road that elbowed, only 200 feet of your property would need to be on that road, and then you can have the whole frontage, you would need to be, the width would need to be a minimum of 3,000 feet.
It's so we're not landlocking.
Correct.
as long as it's there,
ratio.
200 feet, that's gonna limit some things, but also it's necessary because we don't want flag lots or any of that other stuff.
I don't know how you, yeah.
So Tina, we've written down, look at, width, length, proportionality, we'll take a look at that.
Cause I know it is a 3 to 1, you can't exceed 3 times the length and width. Maybe we're.
But just cause
looking
there's a minimum doesn't mean that you have to do everything at a minimum.
Yeah, but if somebody's dividing up properties and stuff like that, sometimes they'll say, oh, a minimum I have to do is 200, and that's where they'll do it, so that they can split off and go somewhere
Well,
else.
and that's when we would say, oh, well, you also have to do X. Oh, oops.
Yeah,
But we'll take a look
Yeah,
at
I
that.
was gonna say,
see what-
but maybe we're looking, if we have the minimum width of 3,000, and maybe we don't look at a 3 to 1 because we're dealing with larger
Yeah,
parcels.
you sure.
Yeah,
Because it is a bigger
Yeah.
chunk, this
Yeah.
has to have some special rules.
Absolutely. okay, we can do that.
Absolutely. Any other kinds of uses that you guys think make sense on large
Yes.
parcels away from residential?
So,
I did have a question about the, conditional use C5 about the airport and landing fields. The one that we have is that one south type thing, is that,
If you had 36 acres, you wouldn't even know it was there.
no,
But
but
you don't, he's
I
like
got,
nothing.
That comes under a special, he was granted a special, that's a long time ago.
Yeah, so he's got,
It's an emergency, so.
Yeah,
yeah,
well, no, he can actually use it for.
Yeah,
I've
he
seen
can
them,
use it,
I've
but-
seen things go off, come and go off
Yeah.
of there.
Right.
so
And
he's
permitted
zoned,
to do that, but it's a special, I can't remember the details because it was a long time ago, but he had to do something, he couldn't do something to the facilities if he got too big or whatever.
Right.
He's limited to what he's got right now and he can't do any more with it.
Cause
But he
I say,
still can
I
use it.
think, didn't he split that and sell, put it, part of it up for sale
not
separate?
the airstrip part, so he's had the airstrip as its own parcel for a long time. He's just got outlier parcels that he's
Okay.
sold off.
Yeah,
Cause
that-
I know it
that
was a
came
big,
before
and then
us.
they
Right,
kind of
I read
cut
the
some of it
minutes.
off.
Yeah, well, that wouldn't happen here, they would have to have 36 acres for
Right.
it.
Like they have that one out in Halden, cause that would be county, but I know they've got a neighborhood that's got an airstrip, and then everybody has their own private
Yeah,
hangars
that's
that
an
come.
airpark.
And they
Call it
could do
airpark.
that.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
an
near this they
option.
could. I mean, if they were gonna have it, you would wanna make sure that it was in the largest acreage.
Oh,
that
yeah.
you could. So,
Might just become that mecca.
we could. You never know.
What areas can accommodate an AR 36 right now?
So you're looking at the
Just
north end of
east.
town and the east end of town, so it would be Del Rio Springs area.
Northwest, yeah,
Yeah, northwest and then
central,
east,
east.
yeah. Nothing, I mean, you could maybe get it if some of the states sold like their land behind the schools. I actually know the general plan wouldn't even support
No.
it. So you need that designation of ranch agricultural to get this, and that's found either up north or out
Up
east.
there. So in the general plan, it's the light green.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of it, but most of that land that the general plan has is light green. We have it zoned as one or 2 acre
Oh, sorry, I'm going the wrong
lots.
place, I'm sorry.
And so this is a nice option for people that have that they could do something different.
Bear with me.
So the west side of 89 up at Del Rio Springs is the only place that would be on the
Yeah.
west side of town.
So it's this RA here, so you're talking, sorry, that's really good for presentation, well,
Wow.
for consuming, but when you go into presentation, it doesn't get well. So you have this RA here, so you have a little bit up north on the northwest end, and then most of it all is to the east of like Bright Star. You get some up here in the north end as well.
Well, none of that's anywhere near Del Rio Ranch. Is that way up there?
Sorry, Del Rio Springs, man, I hate this.
Up there.
Del Rio.
Up here, that old planned community from the early
Okay, right.
2000s.
What's the purple?
Purple is, our HMU's a horizontal multi-use, so it's the idea of where the commercial districts would be in town, so, or multifamily things with
It's a mixed use.
Yeah,
You
mixed
could have,
use.
you could have the
Soccer
store with the residents on
fields?
top
Could
of
be,
it.
could be recreational, absolutely, absolutely. But
Okay,
each
so
district,
are we satisfied that this is gonna be something that they could bring back to us?
Yeah.
And still have further discussion, obviously.
so we'd like to bring it, I think the plan was to bring it in June.
See you next month.
Yeah,
Okay,
so we'll get that in there.
sounds good.
I think it benefits those people who were looking at solar, giving them another
An
option
option,
now,
opportunity.
which I think is fair.
Cause right now you're either locked into homes or homes, so.
And I just assume not see a couple of homes out there, even though I build homes.
Yeah, can't really get the
I'd
water.
like to see a lot, I'd like to see some variety.
Yeah, something new.
Instead of tract after tract. Okay. Are we good with that, Commission? Okay, so we'll move forward to information items. D1 is staff. Do you have anything that you want to present to us tonight besides this?
I don't think so.
Okay. Is anybody on the commission, do they have anything that they would like to bring forward or talk about or discuss in any form or fashion?
I have a kind of question. When we approved, I think it were townhomes or whatever, they're in Bright Star, that little triangular wedge that's in there. Did we put a time criterion there?
We did.
I believe we did,
I
yeah.
think
So
we
that's,
did.
should probably have
I
expired.
think we're pretty close on it, yeah. I'll double check though for you.
That's a good point, because we really wanna be diligent with the time frame thing. Okay, anybody else?
I got a question, that airsoft field on Elmo Manor, did they have to go through P and Z to do what they did out there?
They went through council on that, and so is the council discretionary on that,
So they didn't have to go through any planning and zoning as far as their trenches?
No,
Like that?
no, so within public land, council has discretion for allowed uses. They came in with a develop, or not a development, is it a development agreement? Or a lease agreement
A
through that
lease
way,
agreement.
yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of that was already built when we did the mud runs.
Yeah, there was a lot of that out there, yeah.
So there really doesn't have to be any talk with the economic development or anything, they just bring it up to the council?
There
With a
was
plan?
probably discussion with our
Yeah.
economic development, manager.
So,
We are not in that loop.
I understand
Okay.
that.
She's closing up shop anyways.
Pardon?
She's closing up shop,
I know they have to
unfortunately.
put
Yeah,
that property back the way it was,
yeah.
I don't know if they can do that.
oh, we got dump day coming up, oh, I guess I could've done that on.
And you could have done that.
Staff, can we go back to staff? Information item.
You wanna,
Yeah, just wanna plug dump day.
it says I have discretion.
You do.
Can I have
Whoa.
that discretion? So, community dump day is coming up this Friday and Saturday. We're doing it 2 days, from 9 AM to 3, so we're doing a little shorter hours. Last year, we ran 10 hours one day, worked out really well until the dump threatened to close on us at 3 o'clock. So we're not gonna take the chance this year, we're gonna close it at 3, and then we'll do it another day, the next day on Saturday. So come out there, council members, let's go, let's volunteer our time out there.
We're not here.
At
Okay.
least meet your constituents.
I can get you an easy job, I'll have you check IDs or just, do the political game on that. So we'll be out there 9 to 3, Friday and Saturday at Old Home Manor, at the old ball fields. We're gonna, have everything set up there like we've done the last 2 years out there, and it's been success. We used to do it at the community center, got a little too tight for running the loaders, and then in conjunction with the roll-off trucks getting in there. So, we're
Any
gonna hope.
prohibitive items?
So no, refrigerators, tires, concrete, water heaters, that, yep, electronics. We'll take most of it, batteries, paint, what's that?
You'll take batteries and paint?
We will
No.
not, we will
I
not
was
take
gonna say hazardous.
Hazardous
hazardous material.
Don't take that, okay. Just junk.
That's about it.
Yeah,
just
yard
junk.
waste and junk.
Well, the transfer station does have a little like area they do take batteries, but they charge you for it, so.
Yeah. So just not shameless plug for Friday, Saturday, 9 to 3, Old Home Manor.
So back to
Yes.
you're done?
Yes.
And you're going to have lots of traffic on Saturday because it's also the greenhouse's plant sale on Saturday.
Okay.
So you will have a long string of traffic going down Perkins
It's really
Hill.
hard to pick a date that doesn't have something else
Yeah.
with conflict,
We-
something.
We we finally got everything in line, the dump, or the garbage, company was, yeah, this works, staff, that works. Why are you doing it on Mother's Day weekend? Oh, okay, dang it. You know,
Well,
so
Mother's
you're
Day
like,
is Sunday,
I,
they're not
well,
gonna be there
clean
Sunday.
up your yard for your
Mom
mom.
would certainly like her yard cleaned.
There you go.
Am I allowed to make a comment on the
I have discretion.
You have discretion?
Yes.
I
Will you
quit, so.
discretionise me?
The town manager would like
Ooh,
to
back to
speak.
truck up.
I was double working and I heard some comment about the Icor Airsoft, I'd just like to speak to that. That I think you said that they, unfortunately, it was a great partnership, you know, we look for outdoor recreation and activity in that old manor, we've been very successful and that fit in with that vision. Unfortunately, it wasn't able to be a viable business enterprise for them, but they were exceptional partners during the term of their lease and they have been exceptional in working with development services, with town
Absolutely.
staff, in returning that, piece of property back to the state that it was in. And remember, it was used for the mud run or whatever it was, so a lot of that stuff that was left out there they inherited when they got their property. So I just wanted to be very clear with that. So thank you.
Okay, so D3 is an opportunity for the chairman to speak, so I'm gonna take that opportunity. We have 2 new commissioners and an alternate that are here tonight, and one of the things that in the past has become a bit of a contentious item is the livestock ordinances that we've been messing with for a while. We had one very interesting meeting here one night where we learned that the whole town of Chino Valley hates the idea, but doesn't like their neighbors having overflowing poop in their yard, so.
So we ordered a bunch of plugs for the cows.
Diapers.
So, well, I thought I would take just a minute, it's not really an update, cause there's too many things to remember and go over, but one of the things that I have been mentioning off and on over the last period of time since that meeting is that we will be coming back to this. The town council has not taken away the orders to do something about it, and we will have to do it. My pitch has always been, if you have livestock or have a concern about it, you need to come to the meetings, offer constructive ideas. We will not be having another meeting where everybody gets to say how horrible we are, which we listened to some pretty interesting comments about mom and apple pie,
Or 4-H.
or 4-H, or Little League, and a couple other things that didn't have a thing to do with livestock. Anyways, you folks might, if you feel interested, go back, watch the meeting, but some of the things that we've talked about and haven't totally discarded, but just in conversation, we talked about limiting the number of animals per acre. That didn't seem very satisfactory to give the enforcement person something you could go out there and say you got 2 more animals than you're supposed to. That didn't seem to become viable because there are some folks that have a fairly large amount of animals and take real good care of their properties, and they're not a problem, and they've been doing it all along, and so their view is, why should we have an ordinance that's gonna take away what we've already been doing, and we haven't been bad neighbors. So we didn't discard that. I feel at some point it will be part of what we come up with. The other thing is, animal husbandry came in. I spoke with Will and some of the other folks that have places in town that have larger numbers of animals on it than most people do, and those folks that I visited with take really good care of their properties, and I have asked them to provide us some input on how that works out. So if you have any friends or neighbors that are livestock people and have roping arenas and have a bunch of little Mexican roper cattle that they don't want to have to get a permit for, because they're not, have to have one now, they wanna keep what they've been doing, that's perfectly understandable. The goal, as far as I'm concerned, is we want to leave the folks that are doing a good job, which is about 99% of the people in town. And the other 1% aren't intentionally probably being a problem, but they are because of what they've got on their property. Talk to your friends that have this stuff, get some input from them. We've invited some of the more public groups to come and offer ideas because they're the ones that complain the loudest, and so far we haven't heard anything from them. I want this whole thing to be done to where there's as much public input as possible. We will take the time necessary to do this the right way. At some point, we will have to drive a stake in the ground because we aren't doing our job until we come up with an ordinance. And I would love it for livestock people to come and participate. And if you folks have any thoughts on it, when we have our next meeting, which I'm hoping is going to be another study session, it would be great to come back with some thoughts on what you think would be an easier way to set some standards. Your idea tonight of having the officer being able to come out there with the decibel meter and saying, okay, this is definable. Our ordinance needs to be able to provide the enforcement officer with a pretty clear-cut picture of what's good and what's not good. But what we don't want to do is interfere with the folks that are doing good stuff with livestock. This is Chino Valley. It says right in the general plan, we're a huge farming community.
Good question.
So we want to maintain that because a lot of people moved here for that very reason. A lot of comments we heard is we moved here because we knew there wasn't any regulation on livestock. That's all worked really good until the little set-to we had a couple of years ago, which the gentleman stepped in line because he needed a conditional use permit. We don't want to go down that nebulous enforcement trail. We want to have something in place that will work.
That conditional use permit was just by the,
Just
barely.
Yeah, and it was, I think, 3 zoning meetings and a couple of city council
I think
meetings.
there was 7 total public
Yeah, it
meetings.
just was a big deal, and it shouldn't have been a big
No.
deal. And so, I'm taking this opportunity again to put the word out there that if you got an idea of how this ought to look, you ought to go talk to town staff. You can talk to me, I'm pretty easy to find. I would also offer to call the city councilman. I would offer to even call anybody on this commission, because we're gonna be the ones faced with vetting it, and we're gonna take the shots first. So we might as well have as much say-so about it as we can. But it has to be fair, reasonable, and definitive so that the enforcement officer and the property owner clearly know where they stand. So.
Is livestock enforcement done by the police or by the county or by animal control?
Right now,
It's a
it's
mixture.
It's a mixture, yeah. So if you have more than 1 pig on your property per acre, my code enforcement team's involved. But if you're treating your animals poorly, then that's livestock.
Or could be even law enforcement
Yeah, it
too.
could be so it's really mixed.
That's because there's not a real definitive code for this, and that's part of what we're gonna have to take in is your barnyard animal definition is awesome, because that removes all the 8.5 chickens and the 3 hamsters and all the other stuff we talked about doing, which didn't work out. And for a good reason, because it was an idea that wasn't sound when we talked about it more. So, let's get the word out. We have the press here tonight. Maybe he can put a word in for it. And hopefully we'll have some good results out of it, because truly, this commission has always tried to listen to everybody that had something constructive to say. There hasn't been anybody that hasn't been offered an opportunity to speak at every meeting that we have, because that is, in my opinion, the American way. But if you're gonna get up there and badmouth us and not offer any constructive ideas that are workable, you're not gonna last long in the meeting, because I will not go through that again. That was terrible.
2.5 hours of just public comment.
Public comment, which always wound up with, we don't want an ordinance. And so, all that time we spent and all the grief did not produce one constructive thing out of it. And that's not the way this is supposed to work. So, if the livestock people want a good ordinance, they need to come participate. So that's my speaking for tonight.
Do you believe we need an ordinance?
Doesn't matter what I believe, we've been commissioned by the town to provide them with an ordinance. If, and I'm throwing some guys under the bus here who I actually have great respect for, if this town doesn't truly want an ordinance, then they need to go visit the town council and ask them to stop having us work on it. Because we work for the town council, we do not work for the public. We're commissioned to take care of the public to the best of our abilities. But we actually work for the town council. So if they say we have to produce an ordinance, we can't say no unless we all wanna get retired from the board, which does happen from time to time.
Believing in something doesn't mean that you don't do your job.
Correct. And I have a horse, I love animals, I coached Little League for 1.5 million years. I believe that this town should operate like it has been without an ordinance, but it doesn't operate. It got fouled up and created a big mess. So we need to make an ordinance that gives everybody an opportunity to do what they came here to do, but not make a mess for the neighbor. So that's the goal, and that's what we've been commissioned to do by the town council. So it doesn't matter if I like it or not, because some of the stuff we have to do in here I don't like at all, but that's not what I'm here for, or any of us that are sitting here. So that's my say for tonight. Then we come to item D4, which is open it up to the public, and it says at the discretion of the chair. But I see 2 people sitting there that have been very patient. Would you like to make any comments?
I heard there was gonna be a crowd.
I'm gonna say.
I'm here.
Most of the zoning meetings actually look a lot like this, because what we do is not interesting to anybody really, except for the town to have good stuff in place. And then there are some of the meetings that are really quite interesting.
Well, and I sit on the advisory
Zoning committee.
Oh,
as well,
awesome, thank you for your service.
so we like to keep up on it.
People just should come. This
I
is
know.
part of the American process. If we don't participate, we wind up with Washington DC. So,
Yeah, put up or shut up.
yep, exactly. Okay, so I'm gonna close the public portion, and now the most favorite part of every meeting, a motion to adjourn.
I know we adjourn.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody, for being patient and sitting here.